Peace TV, the solution for humanity.
I am a Muslim, Islam my deen, Allah my Lord, His word Quran, Muhammad Prophet, praise be upon Him. I'm a Muslim for all of time. As I grew up, walking in this great big world, I gazed in awe at the wonders of Allah. And as I learned the cruel lessons of life, Islam shone through as my guide.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to the final episode in this series of Missionary to Muslim, my story on how I reverted from Christianity to Islam. And we've been talking in this series about my reversion and how I came to know the truth of Islam and how it's changed my life. And in the last episode, we spoke about some of the persecution and the battles that I've had to go through, how I've lost many friends and family members because of it. But alhamdulillah, I've also had many benefits, and I've won more than I've lost. And so I have great news to say that even my mother took the Shahada before she passed away. So in my family, I've had many of our family members, direct family members and extended family members, cousins, relations, friends, who have also reverted to Islam. So Allah has blessed my family greatly by this great thing that has happened. But we were speaking the last time we spoke on the missionary deception and how missionaries have purposely come into different parts of the world and are using deceptive means to bring people from Islam to Christianity. So missionaries have gone in purposely into different countries of the world and use deceptive means to bring people to Christianity from Islam. And so what we see is that even in the terminologies they use, I mean, I've listened to a few of these Christian radio stations, and what they do is they speak about, for example, they speak about the Prophet Isa, peace be upon him, and they say, Jesus is the Son of Allah. Now, what they're saying is they speak about the Son of Allah, instead of saying he's the Son of Allah, like they should say, as their Bible says and as their documents say, they say, no, he is the Spirit of Allah. And now no Christian believes that Jesus is the Spirit of Allah. They believe that Jesus is the Son of God or the Son of Allah. So they're purposely making this twisted concept so that the Muslims who are listening will understand this concept, because they go, oh, okay, it's the Spirit of Allah, they get that. So many of these groups, many of these Christian groups are actually aligned, many of these Christian organizations and Christian groups are actually aligned with terrorist groups. And we found in Egypt, for example, that Christian terrorist groups are active there and have been involved there, and they've been discovered over the last few years. And so what they do is they are funded by organizations and missionary organizations from America and Europe. And we see that they are there to spread dissension and division. I mean, I have so many documents on my computer of how adverts have been put over in the air about how negative Muslims are and how positive Christians are. I've seen quite recently where a Muslim man was supposedly killed while he was going into a church by Muslims. And this is nonsense, because he later discovered that this had nothing to do with any religious act, but it was spread all over the news and all over the media saying that this would happen. So these are things that Christian missionaries and evangelists purposely do. So what we find is that many of the reasons why people do convert from Islam to Christianity is because of our personal failures as Muslims. We as Muslims have failed the Muslim community. And that's because many of us are not practicing Islam properly. And many of us are what I call Ramadan Muslims. The only time we see you at mosque, or the only time you come to any Muslim activities is during Ramadan. So what we need to do is we need to stop being Ramadan Muslims, we need to be full-time Muslims. And so many of these people who are part-time Muslims, who only maybe Muslims on a Friday, and we're lucky if we even get them there during Ramadan, we have to stop being part-time Muslims, we have to start being full-time Muslims. And as a full-time Muslim, it's your responsibility to make sure that your brother that's normally used next to you on the left and the right-hand side of you during Salah and the 5 times prayer a day, or is normally next to you on your left and your right during Ramadan, is there again this year. And you also need to make sure that you meet his basic needs. If he's in need, or he has problems, or if he's having a situation of conscience, that you are there to be able to help him, that you're over there to guide him. So in Africa, we find that the main reason that people are leaving Islam is because they're not grounded in Islam to start with. You know, I often use this analogy, we have to be careful we don't make illegitimate children in Islam. So often we have somebody, we say, do you want to take the Shahada? And we pressurize them and they say, yes, yes, they'll take the Shahada. And then that's as far as we go with them. There's no follow-up, there's no backup. We don't check with them. We don't make sure that they have the nutrition that they need. And the nutrition I mean is that they are taught from the Quran, they're taught from the Hadith, they're involved in some type of lessons. And so many of them in Africa, when they revert to Islam, no one follows them up. And I'm sure it's the same in other parts of the world. I have a statistic that I received recently. It's not a confirmed statistic, but I'm inclined to believe that it's true. They say for every 100 people that reverts to Islam, only 2 people stay a Muslim after a year. That means we've got a 2% success rate. That is unacceptable. We cannot have a 2% success rate. That is unacceptable. We need to make sure that we have a 98% success rate. In fact, we should have a 100% success rate. And the failing is not with the person reverted. The failing is the person who took the reversion. If you take a reversion, if you take more than 3 reversions a year, I have a problem with you. Because what happens, it means you're not following up on those people. I can guarantee you're not looking after them financially, you're not looking after them spiritually, and you're not looking after them materialistically. You see, we need to make sure that they are looked after materialistically, and their conscience, they need to be looked after spiritually, and needs to be their physical needs need to be taken care of. In other words, you make to nurture them. Maybe you have to transport them to and from mosque every day, make sure they come to special lessons. So you have a responsibility for them. It's no use having a big piece of paper that says, I've got 1,000 people that reverted to Islam. I want to know how many people you've still got as Muslims after a year. How many people of those people are now bringing other people to Islam? How many of those people know anything about the Quran? You know, many people revert to Islam and 7 or 8 years down the line, they still don't know how to read Surah Al-Fatiha. This might shock you. This is the truth. This is what happened. Many, many people, 10 years down the line, don't even know one word of Arabic yet. And that's because you have failed them. Because you haven't done your job properly. You need to make sure you bring them properly. Another problem is that when people revert to Islam, they bring a whole lot of things from their culture with them. In Africa, we have a problem where we have paganism and Islam combined together. And it's a nice big pot of, it's a nice biryani, it's a nice stew all put together. And it's made it totally the wrong taste, doesn't even taste anything like it was originally supposed to be. So we need to make sure that when people revert to Islam, that we're not giving them something that's been added that has nothing to do with Islam in the first place. I know in India has the same situation where we have people revert to Islam and there's a whole lot of Hindu ideas still clinging together in the religion. And the same with the West. We want to bring our Western ideas and Islam together, and we want to modernize it, and we want to have bands and music and all sorts of other additions that have got nothing to do with Islam. And it's almost like we're bringing Christian ideas into Islam. No. Where your culture is and where Islam is, they come together and they can meet perfectly. But where your culture is going to bring you down, that part of your culture must be left behind. An example is, perhaps in your culture before you became a Muslim, is to eat pork. Well, now that you're a Muslim, you cannot eat pork anymore. Maybe your culture was that it was okay to drink wine with your supper. It's no longer okay to drink wine with your supper, so that must go. Maybe your culture says that you worship saints and you pray to saints. Now that you're a Muslim, you don't do that anymore. Even if you find Muslims that practice that, you no longer be with those Muslims because they are not practicing Islam the right way. So if you have Muslims that say it's okay to drink alcohol, there are countries in the world, and I cannot mention what countries they are because I'm going to be visiting them soon, they'd say that it's okay to eat pork and drink wine. I don't agree with it. And so when I come to your country, I won't be doing those things. And these people claim that they are Muslims by doing this. You cannot be a Muslim if you're eating pork and drinking wine and worshipping saints and things like that. And people might say I'm being too harsh, and they might say I'm being too strict. That's the law. That's what I read in the Quran, and I can't change it. I cannot rewrite the Quran to suit myself. I have to rewrite myself to suit the Quran. And so we need to make sure that when we have a look at we see why people are leaving Islam, it's because they don't have a good understanding of Islam. They're not practicing Islam the way they're supposed to. So we need to get back to basics. If you've been a Muslim for 20 years or 30 years, or you're born a Muslim, or if you've been a Muslim for 6 months, go back to the basics. If anyone is teaching you anything that's not what the Quran teaches you, if it's not what the Sunnah teaches you, so rather leave them and find out something true. And so what we need to do is we need to bring Muslims back to Islam, and the way you bring Muslims back to Islam is practicing the Quran properly. So many people are being led astray by missionaries because they are purposely trying to deceive you. They are going to speak the terminology, they're going to speak like a Muslim, they're going to act like a Muslim, they're going to walk like a Muslim, but they're not a Muslim. A Muslim will set himself apart. He is strict, he's strict upon himself, he audits himself, which means he does checks on himself all the times to make sure that he is actually practicing Islam properly. Now, the sign of a dying nation or a dying people is when we start to tolerate everything that goes on. Now, what I mean by this, I said sometimes we as Muslims, we become too tolerant. Now, I'm not asking you to go do anything extreme. I'm not asking you to do anything stupid. I need you to change people with your hands, and if you can't change them with your hands, you know the hadith, change them with your mouth. If you can't change them with your mouth, change them with your heart. Wherever possible, you need to go change things. So if he's got two hands, you go change them. If you see that there are things happening in your country that you do not want to happen and you're a Muslim, you need to try and change them. You can't just sit back and hope someone else is going to do it. I often meet people and they say to me they're waiting for the scholars to do things. The scholars will never do it. The scholars have got so much on their plate as it is, they haven't got time to do those things. You need to start changing things where you are. And if you can't change them with your hands, you need to change them with your mouth, which means you need to speak out against it. You need to make sure that if you're in a mosque and you start seeing things in your mosque that are creeping in that are not part of Islam, that are making you suspicious that these might be innovations, that these might be things that have got nothing to do with what you signed up to when you became a Muslim, then you start talking to you go speak to the scholars. Go to your nearest Saudi embassy. Go to the nearest embassy that represents a Muslim state and say, this is what I see happening in my local mosque. What can you do? What can you give me advice on? Write to the scholars. Speak to the scholars. Say to them, what do I do about this? My local community, they want me to do this. They want me to do that. They're starting what I suspect might be innovation. What can I do? They will give you advice and they will send somebody to you. Remember that these scholars that are working in your community, that are working as full-time da'is or working full-time in any of these Muslim organizations, you are paying their salary. So they have to come and work for you. And if they have a problem with that, then they must stop taking a salary because you are actually paying their salary and so they work for you. So they will have to come out to your community and help you. Remember that the biggest deception is that many of the Christian organizations, many of these missionary organizations, they can talk the talk, they're not walking the walk. They can talk about how you need to change, they can talk about how to be a Christian, but when you actually see them, they're not actually walking the walk. We as Muslims, we don't talk the talk, we walk the walk first. We can have a short break, and when we come back, we'll continue with this subject.
Walking in this great big world, I gazed in awe.
They were among the best of men ever to have walked the earth. Islam transformed them into better people, and with the grace of Allah, they managed to transform the whole world. They were monks at night, and they were reformers during the day. They lived and died for the sake of Islam. You know who they were? You want to know more about them? Join me on the companions of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam only on Peace TV.
Emulate the real role models who have given humanity plenty of reasons to smile. Join Asim Al-Hakim in Companions of the Prophet, peace be upon him, tomorrow at 10:30 p.m. Saudi Arabia and 11:30 p.m. UAE on Peace TV.
A friendly message by Dr. Zakir. Old Age Home.
Al-Quran, Surah Al-Isra, chapter number 17, verses number 23 and 24 says, your Lord has decreed that you worship none but Him, and that you be kind to parents. Whether one or both of them attain old age in your life, say not a word of contempt. Do not say off to them, nor repel them, but address them in terms of honor. And out of kindness, lower to them the wing of humility and say, my Lord, bestow on them your mercy, even as they cherished me in childhood. There is no place for old age home in Islam.
Peace TV, the solution for humanity.
Did a prophet live 1,000 years? A prophet in a fire? Prophets that brought the dead back to life? A prophet in a whale? Find the answers to these and many other questions. Join us for Stories of the Prophets.
Inspirations from the prophets down the ages past in Stories of the Prophets, next on Peace TV.
Walking in this great big world, I gazed in awe.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We are looking on the subject of how we can get on the right path and stay on the right path, because missionaries are out there to try and deceive you, and if they can, the Christian missionaries and the Christian groups will try and deceive you, and they'll even use trickery if possible. And if you don't think they'll lie to you to convince you to become a Christian, then you need look no further than the Bible, because the Bible says, and Paul says, that you can even lie for the sake of bringing somebody to Christianity. And so this is not tolerated in Islam. We do not lie to people about Islam. We tell them the truth. We don't tell them that Muslims, you don't have to do this. You don't have to. If the Quran says you have to do it, you do it. So we do not deceive people. We reveal the truth from day one. We are not apologetics. No, in Christianity, there's a subject that you study. It's called Christian apologetics. In Islam, we don't have apologetics. We're not apologizing for anything. Islam stands true as it is, stands true from error. It's the way it is. And I have a story that I'd like to tell you, and it's a story that's very common in Africa. And it's about this man who had a farm. He had a big farm, had a big estate, he had a beautiful farm, and he decides he wants to sell his farm. And on this farm, he has a lot of cattle, and his beautiful land. It's got lots of water. The grass is green, it grows high, and so the cattle are fat and they're well fed. His wives, he's got many wives, because in African tradition, you can have many wives you want. And he decides to let this property go for sale. Now, it's the old days, so they don't have television, they don't have radio, and they don't have newspapers, so they send the drums out. And so the drums send the beat out and let everybody know there's something happening on this farm. So all the people in the local community, they all come and they all sit around in a big circle, and he says, I'm selling my property. Anybody who wants to buy my property can make me an offer. I'm selling it for 1,000 cows, you can have my property. So eventually somebody says he'll buy the property, and they get there to the final part of when they're going to buy the property. And the man says, all this property that you see is yours. You can have the house, you can have all the grass that you see out there, all the beautiful meadows. There's a beautiful river, there's a river that runs right past, there's a lake that's yours. Everything you can have is yours, except for one thing. In the middle of the house, there's a post that holds the roof up. Now, you've seen the Zulu houses, or the African houses. They're round houses with a thatched roof, and it has a post in the middle that holds the roof up. And so he said, no, that's a problem. Not a problem. What is it that you want me to not get rid of? He says, on this post there is a nail, and there's a big nail in there. That nail you cannot pull out, you cannot throw it away, because that nail is mine. That will always be mine. It's a memento that I had this property. So whenever I come past, I see that nail, I remember that this was my property once upon a time. The new owner says, not a problem, not a problem. I'm getting a good deal, getting this whole property, beautiful place, not a problem. That nail is yours. It'll always remain yours no matter what happens. Guy says, fine, no problem. The old owner moves out, the new owner moves in. He brings his wife and his kid, and everybody's there and they're enjoying this place. What a wonderful place, absolutely loving it. After 3 weeks, which is tradition in Africa, the old owner must come and visit the new owner and see that he's happy with everything. So after 3 weeks, he comes and visits, and he comes to the house, and as the wives see this man coming from a distance, which is tradition, they start singing and shouting and waving their hands and clapping their hands and start Zulu dancing and playing the drums out of jubilation. This is the way to show the visitor that he's welcome in the village. As he comes there, they bring out the traditional beer, which is African, like a malt that they make, and they slaughter a cow and they put the spit up and they start cooking this meat. Everyone's having a big celebration because the old owner's here, because they're celebrating what a happy home they've got, how happy they are to have this new property, and what a great deal they got in buying this property. And so the man is so happy to be there, and when he gets there, he walks straight into the house, and he has a hat on. He takes his hat off, because it's very hot in Africa and the sun is very hot, and he hangs his hat up on the nail. Nobody says anything, nobody worries about anything, and they see him and they just relax, and everybody sits around, and the men sit together and the women are outside and they sit together, and they eat meat together and they drink the traditional Zulu beer together, and everything seems to be quite fine, everyone seems to be happy. And then eventually what happens, it's time for him to go, and he leads off, and as he starts walking off on the trail, the man who's bought the house shouts to him, "Hey, Nkosi," means old man, teacher, "you've left your hat behind." And he goes, "No, it's on my nail. I will come fetch it the next time I come past." So I think, oh, well, that's okay. It's not really in the way. It's not a big hat. It's not a problem. Well, 3 months goes by, and the hat's been there for 3 months. And so the owner comes back again after 3 months, and they see him in the distance, but this time they don't go into such a big celebration because the hat has been in their way for 3 months, so they're not really that happy about the fact that he's coming back over after 3 months to fetch his hat. So there's no killing of a cow, so they kill a chicken. and they have some beer left over from the night before. And this beer is not really like alcohol like we know it to be. It's more malt. It's made with porridge, with grain. And so it's made in the same day they make it, and within an hour they drink it. And so they drink it, and the man comes there and he sits there, but this time he's got a chain with him. And he goes to his nail and he takes a hat off and he puts a chain on and he puts a hat over the chain. So there's a chain going all the way to the ground and there's hats there. And he drinks something and he eats some chicken and then he goes. And as he goes, they say, don't forget your chain and your hat. And he says, no, no, no. I'm coming past you in 3 days' time. And in 3 days' time, I'll get them because I'm going in another direction. I'll pick it up then. So the new owner says, that's fine. It's okay. It's not really that in the way. It is a problem and it's not really like it. But if you say you're going to be in 3 days' time, I expect you in 3 days' time. 3 days' time comes and they see him coming from a distance. This time there's no chicken slaughter, there's no cow slaughter, there's not even the traditional drink given. And so when the man comes there, he walks in, and this time he's got a leg of an ox with him. He went and he bought some meat from somewhere, he's got an ox's leg. And it's got a piece of string and it's tied up and he puts it onto the nail with the chain and with the hat over it. Now the people are looking at him and going like, what's with all the stuff on the nail? Why don't you get rid of it? The new owner says, well, I can't do anything about it because it's actually his nail. He can do whatever he wants on the nail. The old owner just smiles and he sits there and he watches. Nobody's talking to him. No one says anything to him. And he says that nobody's happy with him being there, but he doesn't do anything about it. So in the evening, he disappears. In the morning when everyone wakes up, they say, but where's the man gone? And they see that he's disappeared. In the middle of the night, he disappeared. So now they're worried. Now, what do we do? Because it's on this nail. Should we take this animal off? Or should we take the animal leg off and the chain and everything? And they say, no, we can't, because they are very superstitious. They have a very strong tradition in Africa. You don't do things like that. Now, by the middle of the day, it's very hot. The temperatures are 34, 35, 40 degrees, and this place is smelling. There's this smell everywhere. Maggots are starting to come out of the meat. The maggots are starting to fall down the chain, going onto the floor. There are flies everywhere. It smells disgusting. They can't handle the smell anymore. By the end of the evening, by the first day of the first evening, the people are they can't handle it so much that they're sleeping outside the house already. By the second day, the smell is so bad, and the insects and the pestilence and the disease is so bad that they moved right off the skirting of where the house and the property is, so the gate of the property. And by the third day, they can't handle it anymore. They actually leave the property altogether, because now there's crows coming in, and there's insects coming in, and there's pestilence. The place stinks. It's terrible. So the old owner moves off the property altogether, and he wanders off and he goes and stays at some friend's house. Now, what is tradition in Africa? If anyone deserts the property, then the old owner who owns that property can come back. And so what happens, the sly old owner who disappeared has been watching from a distance behind some trees. And when he sees the new owner leave the property, he comes back and he takes and he cleans up everything, washes all the stuff out, washes everything out, and he takes ownership again. Now, what is the moral of the story? Why have I given you such a long story? You see, this is what happens when Muslims become complacent. When we sit back and do nothing, we allow a nail to be planted in our lives. And we don't know what is going to be added onto it. It can look harmless. It can look something as simple as a little hat. It can be something really simple as someone coming in, just coming into our community doing something simple. But what we're actually allowing is pestilence and disease and suffering to take place in the long run. And eventually what we will find is we'll find the religion of Islam being totally pushed out the back door. We've seen in certain countries in the world where Islam was so strong and so dominant, how one by one we found those countries slowly falling apart. Yes, there is great strides forward that we see in Islam. Many countries that were predominantly non-Muslim, we now found Islam. I know that in North Korea, and I don't want to say much more about it, but in North Korea I have brothers who have accepted Islam. And for their own safety, we can't talk too much about what's happening there. And Islam is spreading throughout the world. Places where religion is not permitted, Islam is spreading. But we've got to be careful that we do not have the hole in the bucket syndrome. And what I mean by a hole in the bucket is that we are filling the bucket up with water, and at the bottom, the water is dripping out the bottom. So we're getting Muslims in, but we're not looking after the Muslims that are falling out the bottom of the bucket. We need to patch up the hole. And the way we patch up the hole is getting more involved in dawah. And how can we get involved in dawah? How can we get involved in propagating Islam? How can we get involved in making sure Muslims stay Muslims? Well, there are a few ways. One is that you need to open your mouth. In other words, you need to go speak up when you see something happening. If you're not happy with the nail being put into your area where you're living, or the nail being put into your mosque, or the nail being put into your school, or the nail being put into your community, speak up against it. So you need to speak up. Dawah means as well that you need to speak up and call people, invite people to the way of Islam with wise words and wisdom. Second thing that you need to do is you need to open your heart. In other words, you need to start caring about your Muslim brother and care about those around you. Secondly, you need to open up your heart. That means you need to start caring about your Muslim brothers around you. And caring about your Muslim brothers around you is not waiting for it to get to a point where he's now already turning away from Islam and looking at another religion, that now you only decide you're going to wake up and look after him and help him. The third way is that you need to open up your wallet. And you open up your wallet by looking at what organizations you can help out that are doing the work that you're not prepared to do yourself. You know, some of Muslims are very lazy. We can be very, very lazy. And what we do is we want someone else to do the work we want to do. If you cannot do it, open up your wallet so that somebody else can do it. The second point, where can you do dawah? You do dawah anywhere, on the bus, on the train, on any place you can find to do dawah. There is no right and wrong place to do dawah. You do dawah wherever you can, whenever you can. So when do you do it? When shouldn't you do it? You should do dawah all the time. There shouldn't be a right and wrong time to do dawah. Dawah should be done all the time. How do you do dawah? Well, learn to do dawah one step at a time. So how do you do dawah? You learn to do dawah one step at a time. Learn a lot of the little that you know. So the first step on how to do dawah, learn a lot of the little you know. If you only know a little bit about Islam, then learn a lot about that one subject. Don't try and learn everything, because we're not all supposed to be great learned scholars on Islam that know every single thing. If you only know a little bit, learn a lot about a little. And then teach a little about the lot that you know, a little at a time. So teach a little of the lot that you know, a little at a time. This is the best way. Now what? How do you take it forward? Well, if you wanted to take it forward and want to teach people, we have to prevent our Muslim brothers and sisters from leaving Islam, and we can only do this by bringing the truth of Islam to them, by strengthening and making them strong Muslims. And inshallah, the work of Peace TV will continuously be blessed, because it is doing exactly that, helping you to be a strong Muslim. So inshallah, we will see that a strong Muslim community being built. So I see I'm out of time. Thank you for joining me in this series, and from me, Areeb Islam, until I see you again, Assalamu alaikum.
I am a Muslim, Islam my deen, Allah my Lord, His word Quran, Muhammad Prophet, praise be upon him. I'm a Muslim for all of time. I am a Muslim, Islam my deen, Allah my Lord, His word Quran, Muhammad Prophet, praise be upon him. I'm a Muslim for all